So you are in your institute, most people are doing labor economics, health economics, so there are some people doing labor education and health economics.
Yeah, well, I think like that we have a big group with education, and among them like some like labor and education.
Okay.
And actually like with well, one of my colleagues who I don't think is here, but we are writing a paper that is very, very similar to yours. So that's why I'm particularly interested in seeing it. Good. So it's about the relationship between education and health, and actually we are looking at a period in which like there was a expansion of the higher education sector, like in Russia after like the collapse of the Soviet Union.
That's it. Also, because most studies they focus on the US and the UK, so it's nice to have also evidence from other countries.
Yes, certainly. Like, yeah, I mean, I know that there are like plenty of these exploit, especially some reforms on secondary education in England. But yeah, there are like fewer papers that, yeah, as you say, that do not focus on UK-US experience.
Okay, well, I think it's about time to begin. I would like to welcome everyone to the seminar of the Center for Institutional Studies at the HSE University. We are very pleased to have as our speaker tonight, Professor Massimiliano Bratti from the University of Milan, the Department of Economics Management and Quantitative Methods. Massimiliano got his PhD and master's from University of Warwick and also from University of Ancona in Italy. He does different aspects of human capital, labor, education, health, migration, population analysis. And tonight, Massimiliano is going to present a paper on education, health, and health-related behaviors, evidence from higher education expansion. And we will finally learn if higher education makes us healthier or less so, which many people suspect is the case. Massimiliano, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thanks a lot for your invitation, and it's a pleasure to present this paper that is joint work with Elena Cottini from the Catholic University of Milan and Paolo Binetti from University of Piemonte Orientale. So as you were saying, in this paper, we are trying to assess the causal effect of education on health and mostly health-related behaviors. And like most of the literature, we try and focus on higher education expansion. So on increase in education produced by, not by compulsory schooling laws, but by the expansion of higher education. Okay. So there is, all we know that there is widespread evidence on the economic returns to education. So education helps individuals to get better jobs and also higher earnings. In contrast, and usually this literature obtain very similar results in the sense that they show important causal effects on economic outcomes, while the literature on the returns to health, so on the health returns to education, is much more mixed. And in particular, is mostly focused on evidence leveraged from compulsory schooling laws. And this is important. This is an important fact because all this paper, they mention that the returns, evidence from health returns to this kind of reforms might provide evidence that is not general to the population, but may mainly concern individuals that are on the left tails of the education distribution. So sometimes we refer to these guys as marginal students or low ability individuals. So those that sometimes decide to stay in the educational system just because they are forced by compulsory schooling laws. So by laws increasing age of compulsory schooling. However, we might have different effects at different points in the educational distribution, Or in other words, effects might be non-linear. Sorry about that. I was just in a department meeting, so probably you get a lot of that. So let me check whether I can get rid of this.
Your department meetings are so nice compared to ours.
Now, these are people just leaving the meeting because there is a part that is okay. Probably it's finished, but anyway, don't focus on that. In this paper, so as I mentioned, what we do, we try and focus on the expansion of higher education supply. I will not spend a lot of time in reviewing the literature, but there is already a consistent evidence on the effect of educational health that is mainly, as I said, is mainly coming from compulsory schooling reforms. For instance, there is a work by Kempner using compulsory schooling laws in Western Germany, in which they show, Kempner and cohorts, in which they show that education positively affects health, but there is little evidence on health-related behaviors, such as smoking. There is a nice paper by Clark and Royer in the American Economic Review. They use 2 compulsory schooling laws in the UK, which were quite effective in the sense that they, as a response to this reform, many individuals were retained in secondary education, and they have a very precise identification in the sense that they use a fuzzy regression discontinuity design based on the month of birth. So they focus on the cohorts that were born in months, which made them eligible for the reform compared to the previous birth cohorts in terms of month. And they actually find no effect on neither health outcomes nor behaviors. Then there are these, for instance, these 2 papers, they consider several outcomes. Then there are papers that mainly focus on individual outcomes. So for instance, there are papers on body mass index. These are some papers like Grabner, Kempner, and Brunello. And they usually show that education negatively affects body mass index and decreases the probability of obesity. And then there are other papers that use different outcomes again. For instance, the probability of doing exercise, of having health checkups, like this paper by Park and Kang. And there is also some papers that they use more objective medical data when measuring the health outcomes. However, what is the literature more directly related to our paper is the literature focusing on the effect of higher education. On this, actually, evidence is much more limited in the sense that, for instance, in our working paper, we just mentioned 4 papers. There is a paper by Ekman and cohorts. They show actually, they use US data, and they show that they consider a couple of health outcomes. So smoking and health limits work. In this case, they use for identification. So for determinants of the level of education, in particular on the effect of having of graduating from college versus having some college, so not completing. They use as potential determinants local unemployment, college proximity, and local college tuition. And they have interesting results. They show that the returns to education depends on individual cognitive ability, and not for smoking, but for health limits work. So there might be some complementarity between the level of education and what we sometimes call innate ability. There is a paper by Kamhofer and others for Germany. The interesting bit of this paper is that they consider both physical and mental health. They base, again, identification on a kind of college supply, in the sense that they use the number of enrolled students, which gives a little bit the sense of the number of slots available for students, although this kind of IV might even might conflate the demand and supply effects, because it's not exactly college proximity or the availability of a local college, but also depends on how many people enroll in college. Having said that, they show that actually marginal effects, so the effects of higher education are quite heterogeneous. Indeed, they compute marginal treatment effects. And they interestingly show that for 40% of the population, the marginal effect is nil. And from this, they conclude that further increasing access to college will not produce huge increases in the health of the population, mainly because for many people, the returns are nil. And so the idea is that the marginal and the students that will enter higher education from just increasing higher education supply will be the low ability. And if the low ability, they have lower returns, this means that further increase in higher education supply and access will not produce substantial positive effects. There is a paper by Junk and Offers on the UK. This is also interesting because they use two reforms. One is very similar to the same reform that was used in previous papers. For the UK was a reform increasing compulsory schooling age. And also they consider the expansion of higher education. So they provide instrumental variable estimates using the two different kinds of instruments, compulsory schooling laws and the expansion of higher education. And the outcome in this case are chronic disease. In this case, they do not find significant effects on the health conditions, chronic health conditions, and also measured as a dummy or as a number of chronic health conditions, while they find some protective effect of education on cardiovascular disease and diabetes. In this case, the model is identified again so in this case, the identification is a little bit unusual because it's not really for the college expansion and IV. They just use differences across cohorts in the average college completion rate. And they claim that after controlling for some cohort trend and so on and so forth, what they get is the causal effect. But this is not, at least for the expansion of higher education, is not a traditional IV strategy. Last paper by quite recent by Cohen and Teff, they exploit higher education expansion in the US at the state level. The interesting point in this paper is that they do not use IV, so they do not instrument college achievement. So the fact of holding a college degree by higher education supply expansion, they just focus on higher education supply expansion per se, and they estimate an intention to treat effect model. And they find positive effects on physical exercise and self-reported health, and the negative effects of smoking. So how do we contribute to this literature? We try to contribute to the literature, limited literature, using higher education supply expansion. We also exploit a compulsory schooling law that was introduced in Italy in the past, and try to contrast the IV estimates obtained using the two kinds of instruments that reasonably they have compliers in different distribution, in different points of the distribution of years of education. So we expect the higher education supply expansion so these are years of schooling. So we expect the higher education supply expansion to act on these individuals, while compulsory schooling laws on these individuals. So it's important and is interesting to provide evidence from the two reforms. And also this helps us to check whether potentially returns are linear with respect to the years of education. A specific feature of our study is that the data is very rich in behaviors. So we have information on a number of health-related behaviors, but we don't have many health outcomes. So we mainly focus on body mass index and obesity. And the reason is that to work with this data, which is restrict access, since we need information on the municipality of residence of the individuals, in order to get this piece of information, they remove potentially sensitive data that are related to specific diseases. And that's the reason why we mostly have health-related behaviors rather than outcomes. What kind of data do we use? We use the National Institute of Statistics survey data that is called the Survey Aspects of Everyday Life. This is cross-section data, so it's not a panel, which covers a period between 2001 to 2016. 2014, the survey was not administered. As I said, we are working with restricted access data from what is called the Laboratory for Elementary Data Analysis of the National Institute of Statistics. The pros of using this data is that since in our identification strategy, we are using college proximity, we can measure college proximity at the municipality level. And the counts, as I said, since we want to have more precise information on where the individuals live, we don't have many data on the health outcomes. The other kind of data that we use is data that was collected by two of the authors of this paper, that is Elena Cottini and Paolo Vinetti, with Simone Morriconi, for another paper that refers to the supply of higher education, so the number of branches, university branches, then their location at the municipality level since the Italy's unification. So these are the outcomes that we are using from the survey data. We have an indicator of physical activity that is performing physical activity at least once or 2 times a week. Eating fruit and vegetables at least once a day, the number of pieces, drinking at least 1.5 liters of water, having breakfast, not eating less than once a week or never eats sweets and salty snacks, consumes less than 1 to 2 glasses of gas beverages. So the first bit of the outcomes, they refer mainly to dietary, so the food, the drinks that these individuals get, and some physical activity. We call this as healthy habits. Then we have some outcomes. The only outcomes that we have in terms of health are an indicator for obesity and the body mass index. Then we have some indicators of behaviors in terms of alcohol consumption. So we have light alcohol consumption, so it doesn't drink more than 1 glass of wine, beer per day. a number of alcohol units a day, never consuming alcohol. Then we have some indicators of smoking habits. So ever smoke in your life, being a current smoker, and the number of cigarettes per day. I will focus on these location variables for the colleges that are our IVs. They are indicators for the nearest faculty. So faculty is a school in the municipality of residence of the individuals. So in order of distance, the closest will be having a college in the same municipality. Then we have having it in the neighbor municipality, okay? Then in the border municipality. Then we have in the same province, but not in the bordering municipality. In the bordering provinces, in the same Bay region, but not the bordering provinces, and in the bordering region, okay, or farther away. In Italy, provinces are not 3, okay, so we have around 110 provinces. Just to have just a quick overview of the data, years of education are computed on based on the highest qualification achieved. So for instance, primary school is 5 years, lower secondary will be 8, the upper secondary will be 8 plus 5, so 13, and so on, so forth. So actually, we know that average educational achievement is not that high in Italy, especially in terms of tertiary education. If we consider the whole population in this in our samples for all cross sections, which includes people from 25 to 85 in different cross sections, the tertiary education achievement is pretty low, it's 10%. And then you also get an idea of the different outcomes that we are considering. So for instance, just to focus on some of these, about 23% of people smokes, number of cigarettes, also considering people not smoking is free, and so on and so forth. 10% are obese, and so on. What about the identification strategy? As I already anticipated, we are going to use two-stage least squares, instrumental variables estimated with two-stage least squares. So we have a first stage in which we want to explain years of education, years of schooling. And in some specification, this is measured as years of schooling. In other specification, we focus on the effect of having a college degree versus an upper secondary school diploma. So the model is identified by the dummies referring to the college proximity that I just described. So I don't go through them again. And then we have some individual characteristics that are morely demographic characteristics, that is gender and age. In particular, we introduce a quadratic function in age, quadratic polynomial in age. And then we control for, so these proximity variables are measured at the municipality level, while then we introduce in the model also province by year fixed effects, okay? And these refer to the years of the survey. So the idea is that with this province by year fixed effects, we control for all factors that are affecting individuals from different cohorts, but at the same year. This might be, for instance, the quality of the health system. This will be at the province level. This will be controlled by these fixed effects, for instance. The main identification assumption for our instrumental variable strategy is that our college proximity variables are exogenous, which means that they must be correlated with an observable potentially affecting health behaviors of health outcomes. We also have a measurement issue that is also found in some other papers, that is even the restricted access data sometimes does not record the municipality of birth, but only the municipality of residence. So we might have some measurement error because actually in the first stage, we are imputing the college supply when the individuals were 19 years old. So when they were supposed to take the college decision. But actually, we only have the municipality, the current municipality of residence. So we impute the college supply on the basis of the current municipality of residence. So we expect this instrument to work well for so-called stayers. So for those that actually they enroll in the local college. We check a little bit these potential measurement error issues, which might make the instrument weak by also restricting the analysis to the sample in which the municipality of birth is equal to the municipality of residence. So we were not given the municipality of birth, but just an indicator that flags whether individuals are residing where they in the same municipality in which they were born. And then in the second stage, we have the health outcome or the health behaviors that we want to explain, and then our endogenous variable of interest, that is years of schooling, and then we have the same control variables as in the first stage and the fixed effects. What about potential problems with our instrument? So I already said that the province year fixed effect, they partly control for other factors that might affect health and might be correlated with educational achievement. You might think, for instance, that although the college proximity refers to when individuals were 19 years old, there might be some correlation with by which in provinces that are better endowed with colleges, they also have more hospitals and so on and so forth. So this is controlled by province year fixed effects. But we think also that maybe this is less important when you consider health behaviors compared to health outcomes, because, for instance, if you consider health outcomes, you might think that the health outcome may partly depend on the quality of the health system, why we claim that in many cases, health behavior is quite independent on the characteristics of the health infrastructures. I just took an example. Would you just smoke more or do more exercise or less exercise because the quality of the health infrastructure is higher or there is a better provision? This is much less indirect, I would say, if it's credible at all, with respect to the fact that maybe, I don't know, you survive from a surgery if the quality of the health infrastructure is better, and you might afford a higher quality of health infrastructure because you have higher educational achievement, so also a higher income. In any case, we don't want to rely only on these arguments. So we also show for what we have the correlation between the creation of new faculties and the life expectancy. Actually, we have life expectancy at the province level, I think. No, this is the municipality level, sorry. So we have life expectancy only for 1992, from 1992, sorry. So this is the earliest point that we have. And what we do, we regress the change in the faculty between 1992 and 2010 to the initial life expectancy. So the idea is to check whether there was a higher increase in the number of faculties in places in which life expectancy is higher. So this might be a problem because there might be, this is the instrument that we are considering. So you might think that, wait a moment, so there might be a higher supply of higher education, higher expansion when returns to education are larger, and you expect that returns to education are larger when life expectancy is larger as well, is longer. Actually, we don't find much evidence that this correlation is, albeit positive, is quite weak. So you see that the pattern is quite flat. This is a little bit the trend in college expansion over time. So this is Italy. We consider in this figure just for years, 50, 1950, 1970, 1990, and 2010. And you see a little bit, you have a little bit the taste of what happened in Italy in terms of creation of new branches, what we call the facoltà or faculties. That is not the people working there. In Italy, in Italian, facoltà are the branches. So the school, the equivalent of school. So we have a school of economics, school of politics, and so on and so forth. And you see that there were quite a lot of creation of new over time of new branches in the center, but also in the south. In the north, there were already quite a bit, even in the 1950s, but even in the north, you see that the number increased. So we are exploiting the variation in the college proximity across cohorts, different birth cohorts. So depending on when they were born, some people, even in the same province, they could benefit from higher college proximity compared to a previous course. These are the first stages. Actually, in the paper, we estimate different specifications. So in this table, we report the first stages that we used in the paper. We have a first stage for the pool sample, then we have the first stage for male and female that we use when we report gender-specific estimates. Usually the instrument is okay, and you see that what mainly what make a huge difference is the fact of having a college in the same municipality, which is the reference category. Then you see that with respect to the reference category, for instance, having the college in the bordering municipality is produces a minus 1.3 years of schooling decrease. And then you see that although I would say that the effect is not really monotonic, there is the effect is larger when you have the nearest college in other region. Maybe just focus on, so this is the first stage when instead of years of schooling, we consider the college dummy, and you see similar effects. In this case, for instance, people with a college in the bordering municipality, they have a 12% percentage points penalty in the probability of graduating, having a college degree. And then when we use the compulsory schooling reform, this is quite consistent with the evidence from the previous literature. So nominally, if all people comply with the reform, an increase by 1 year in compulsory schooling should be associated with should produce an increase of 1 year in the actual number of years. The coefficient that you get is always smaller, which might depend on different things like compliance with the obligation was not perfect. And also in this case, we have another issue is that the number of years of schooling is inputted according to the highest, as is done in most papers, with the highest educational qualification achieved. So for instance, if one drops even primary school, let's say, so it gets only 4 years of schooling, this will be codified as 0 years of schooling, because only people completing a given level can be attributed years of schooling. And this is the same for all surveys that record the highest qualification achievement and not the qualification achieved even if you drop out from a given educational level. These are a little bit the results. So these are the baseline results in which we have years of education as the main variable of interest. We report OLS and IV estimates. Maybe I'm checking the time, but maybe I have to speed up a little bit. So usually what we find is that when you use OLS, usually you find a positive association between with good health habits, physical activity, eating fruit, having breakfast, and so on and so forth. Maybe it's a little bit strange, this water. So you apparently the more educated you are, the less you are likely to drink 1.5 at least liters at least of water. And then in terms of alcohol consumption, you find a negative effect on light alcohol consumption, on number of alcoholic units. This is interesting. So never consume spirits. So it seems that if you are more educated, you are less likely to never consume spirits. And then in terms of smoking, there is a negative association. What we get instead, so this association may be plugged by endogeneity. So we focus on the instrumental variable estimation. Most of the effects retain the significance and the sign. And sometimes they are slightly larger in magnitudes. So for instance, the 1 year of schooling increases the probability of physical activity by 3%, just to take an example. But interestingly, the negative effect on never consuming spirits is confirmed. The negative effect on obesity and body mass index is confirmed, which is very consistent with the findings in the literature. And even more interesting is that apparently, when you use IV, there is a positive association with there is a positive effect with the smoking. In particular, if you consider these two last outcomes, it increases the probability of current smoking by about 1% point for an increase of 1 year of education, and the number of cigarettes by 0.14. Then we did the same kind of, we applied the same strategy, but using as the treatment a college degree dummy, and then we compare the behavior of people with the college degree with people only having upper secondary education. In this specification, we are considering, we are just using college expansion to instrument years of education, but then in the sample, we have people with any year of education. So from primary to tertiary education. When we focus on this specification, we just compare tertiary educated people with upper secondary educated people, and the effect are confirmed. Actually, sometimes are even larger. You might think that this is a better comparison group when you specifically focus on tertiary educated people versus people with upper secondary education. So again, the results are more or less what we have seen before, and also the positive effect on smoking is confirmed. So just to wrap up, we find the positive effects on healthy habits. We find the positive effects in terms of health outcomes, in terms of reducing obesity and body mass index. Effects on alcohol are not so straightforward because it reduces like alcohol consumption, but also it reduces never consume spirits, while we find some positive effects on some unhealthy behaviors like smoking. As I told you, we also exploit a different reform that was about compulsory schooling that was introduced in October 1963, according to which course born after 1949 and later see an increase in years of education, compulsory years of schooling. In particular, the increase in years of schooling was for a course born after 1951 was 3 years, from age 11 to age 14. But for a course between 1941 and 1951, actually the increase was not that of the same amount, mainly because the new reform just constrained individuals, to force the individuals to be in school until the age of 14. And of course, depending on the birth cohort, this will mean 1 more years, 2 more years, or 3 more years of schooling. For that reason, because there is not a sharp discontinuity, so there are courses that are partially treated by different years of compulsory schooling, we apply instrumental variables. So we follow the same strategy that has been used, for instance, in a paper by Brunello and cohorts. So the first stage is very similar to the one that we have already seen from for years of schooling exploiting college proximity. Now we just have birth cohort indicators, okay? And in order to mimic the same strategy of regression discontinuity design, we also include a polynomial in birth cohorts. I think it's linear in our case. So we just focus on the jump in the years of schooling determined by the introduction of the reform. And we consider as the IV the years of compulsory schooling, which, as I told you, depends on the birth cohort, because some cohorts are partly treated. Now the second stage is considering the health behavior, and our variable of interest is years of education, and then we have the polynomial as well. In this case, we cannot include the province by time by year fixed effect, because it will absorb the variation in the instrument. So we use separate province and time fixed effects, year fixed effects. The interesting thing is that when we use compulsory schooling laws, although the OLS association are usually positive, we don't find much action in the IV. Actually, most of the coefficients are not significant. This might be due to the weak IV problem. The DevStat, the world statistics, is quite okay, is above 10, but is not that high. So we claim that it might be the case that it's not that the compulsory schooling laws didn't produce an effect in terms of health through education, but the reform might be the effect of the reform might be weak. And in order to address this issue in the paper, we also report the effects of completing lower secondary education versus primary school, because if you stayed in school until the age of 14, you were more likely to complete the lower secondary education diploma, because this increase from 11 to 14 was applying so until age 10 you were in primary school. From age 11 to age 14 you were in lower secondary school. So the reform was increasing force you to stay in the lower secondary cycle, educational cycle. So another way of assessing the effect of compulsory schooling laws can be comparing individuals with lower secondary education versus primary schooling. You find this in the paper. I'm not sure that we have this in the slides. In this case, the IV is much stronger, but we continue not to find any effect.
Milan, I'm sorry to jump in, but our time is running
okay.
out. So,
okay, so
how much
time I just wrap up. So we do some
not to rush, but just please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So we so how many minutes are left? Just to
if you can do it in 5 minutes, that would be ideal. Then we'll have lots of time for discussion. Thanks.
Okay. So I will rather than showing all the results in the tables, I will just mention the main results that we get. We do some robustness check, focusing on people for which the municipality of residence was the municipality of birth, and we find pretty similar results. We do some check for multiple testing, because if you have many outcome variables, it might be that some coefficients turn out to be significant just by chance, but we have shown that we have many significant effects, so this is unlikely, and the multiple testing confirms this. We report some heterogeneity by gender, and in this case, so for instance, in this case, the circle are males, the box is females, the circle is on the left-hand side. You see that for most outcomes, you find very similar effects, that although for some outcomes, there are differences that are interesting. For instance, in this is like alcohol consumption or ever smoke. And also we report differences by age group, and we divide between people between 25, 50, 50 and 70, and more than 70. And we also find different effects. So to wrap up, in terms of gender, effects across gender are generally similar, except for smoking. In terms of the age groups, we find some outcomes to be very similar across age groups. We find some age heterogeneity in terms of healthy dietary habits, which we interpret a bit in the conclusions. Indeed, what is interesting is that differences in healthy habits are usually larger at mid-age, while that on body mass index is decreasing in magnitude by age. So it seems like, so the way we interpret this is that for younger individuals, healthy habits may not only be motivated by health reasons, but also by other reasons, like concerns about physical appearance, also depending on the fact. So you might rationalize this in different ways: the existence of a marriage market rather than the existence of positive returns in the labor market to physical appearance. Another main takeaway is that actually the effect, the relationship between education and health does not always go in the expected direction. So for instance, we find that education increases smoking, which is an unhealthy behavior. And our paper also showed that potentially the results that you get by focusing on reforms, increasing higher education supply, are different from the facts that you get with compulsory schooling laws, which might hinge on the fact that the returns to education in terms of health might be nonlinear. Another interpretation it might be that since on average people in higher education have higher ability than people in compulsory schooling, it might also be the same thing can be also expressed in terms of complementarity between education and health. And that's all. Thanks a lot.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Massimiliano. Lots of food for thought to digest. So the floor is open for discussion, questions and answers. Let's see if there are any. Please use chat or otherwise indicate if you have a question.
Well, I would like to start.
Of course.
Well, thanks, Massimiliano, for the presentation. So I might have missed it, but my first question is about the instrument. So, you explained that for higher education is about like college proximity. My question, and yeah, sorry if I missed it, but I was wondering, like, do you take into account for like just, I don't know, maybe to call it like capacity? I'm thinking in the case like if like I live like 5 kilometers away from like the closest university, and then there's like another university that is built next to this one, so like I'm not closer, but there are more places available. Like, is the model somehow taking this into account? Or
we tried with different indication. I think with different indicators of supply. In the Italian case, is not a big issue, I must say, because at least at the time mobility was not that huge, and there is no constrained capacity in terms of demand. So there was no selective entrance. So this means that if you want to cut the cost, the closest the better, especially if you think that. So I expect actually all this proximity IV, the compliers are the people who decide to enroll in higher education because they have a close college. So probably what is relevant is how much you can cut the cost, because those that can afford should be not sensitive to college proximity. So they will pick up the best college or the most reputed college, whatever the distance probably. So we thought that in this case, more than capacity or the fact of having different closer, the closest is as good as all the other that you might have just around the closest in terms of what we want to get. But yeah, we can of course, with this education supply, you can try different combinations. For instance, we don't have the field of studies, so we'll be not particularly used to distinguish between proximity to a economic school, political school, whatever, engineering school, because we don't have information on the field of the degree. Otherwise, you could also do that.
Okay, thanks.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bernardo, and thanks, Massimiliano. Let me see if there are any further questions or comments on this very important topic. Massimiliano, if I may, to summarize the study, basically education makes people more aware of health issues, more rational, better educated, and that helps to improve health outcomes. Like, for example, they are less likely to become anti-vaxxers or whatnot and maintain healthy lifestyles. But on the other hand, education causes some anxiety, some stress, because it places people in a more competitive environment, raises their aspirations, and as a result, that might adversely affect health. Is that correct? Are these?
Yeah, it might be. You might, although we cannot really distinguish the channels, some of our results can be interpreted in the way just you put forward. For instance, a positive effect on smoking can be interpreted in that way, in the sense that if you think that people in stressful jobs, for instance, are more likely to smoke, you might then think, okay, higher education leads you to do more stressful jobs or have a more stressful lifestyle, and this might also increase the probability of smoking. We are not able to test this channel because we don't have any information on mental health or stress. Mental health is not really the right word. You will need like a measure of stress. So in the survey to test that this might be, for instance, in our case, the channel leading from education to smoking. But you're perfectly true. There is evidence that, and some of the papers that I mentioned, actually, they test the effect on mental health, but this is different from stress, actually, mental health.
It just struck me that some of the most successful economists, people in our profession, have remarkable longevity. They live into their late 1980s. Sometimes they live 90 years and beyond. So maybe that's something that indicates that people who are highly educated and who do really very well in their field, for them the anxiety is not as strong. They are pleased with the outcomes, and as a result, they can reap the rewards of education in terms of better health. But perhaps you can find some variables that would allow you to isolate these effects. So negative effects are twofold. The first one is competitiveness of a field which people with higher education operate in, and second, aspirations. So if there are some variables that might allow you to isolate these effects and measure their contribution, because they're quite different. And one thing is, if by any chance you can have some measures of life satisfaction. So life satisfaction is something that alleviates the aspiration effect. If I'm pleased with my life, then I guess I'm confident I'm doing well. And in that case, only the positive effect remains anyway. That's something that I would be quite interested to see if that's possible, because that will help you to more clearly articulate the results that you're presenting.
Yeah, we might have in the survey some indicator of life satisfaction or job satisfaction. So in order to disentangle the channels, this might be
so life satisfaction may be a sorting factor. If you interact the life satisfaction with education, you might get some interesting results, I guess. So that's the easiest way to go about this.
Thank you.
No, absolutely. Okay, so Sergey mentioned that might be a selection bias, might very well be, yes. And sadly, some good economists die. Albert is one example, without long before they reach advanced stage. So it goes different ways. Okay, let me see if there are any other.
Sorry, I have one question related to like what this selection bias, and so
Okay.
it's actually related to one of the in the last takeaway. You mentioned that like some differences in healthy dietary habits are larger in the group 25 to 50. I was wondering, like, could be the case that like after you reach 50, like those who don't have healthy habits, like maybe they died before and therefore you don't see the differences in the sample? Like, could be somehow related to this, or like to account?
Probably, I would say that this applies to this may apply to the last category that we consider, that is from 70 to 85. So all these effects in the last symbol, that is a triangle, are of course potentially plagued by differential mortality. So differential mortality is not so huge until age 70, especially because a lot of mortality depends on diseases on which you don't have any control, and probably education doesn't make is genetic. So unless education is genetic, probably there is not a huge difference. But then after age 70, probably the quality of screening, the health knowledge might be relevant. So the result, I would say that the results for the oldest age group are potentially affected by differential mortality. Although some papers, like the most convincing paper, but again, cannot be probably extended to our setting in which we use higher education. Clark and Royer, for instance, for the compulsory schooling law, they also consider differential mortality and they don't find anything. But again, it might be different because we now are focusing on different people that are not those that get education because of compulsory schooling, but they get higher education because of college proximity. So there might be actually differential mortality. In this case, I expect effects to be not significant because you will have the most selected among the low educated people. So usually the bias here is against finding effects.
Okay, fair enough. Let me see if there are any further questions and comments to this very interesting paper. And don't forget that we have this paper that can be uploaded, and the link is in the web column, in the chat column of this seminar. I don't see any further questions and comments, and then what remains to be done is to thank Massimiliano for very informative and thought-provoking paper. I think policy implication for us is to make full use of our education in maintaining healthy lifestyles. And other than that, don't worry, be happy. Don't become too upset if your paper is rejected or promotion delayed. Don't have anxiety to reduce your healthy and successful professional life. Bernardo, if you can please remind us what's coming up next.
Yes, well, first of all, thanks, Massimiliano, for your presentation. And yeah, so we have a next seminar coming in 2 more weeks. So on the 3rd of March, we will have Nuno Palma from the University of Manchester, and he's going to present his paper titled American Treasure and the Decline of Spain. So we will go to some economic history.
Terrific.
Well, thanks again to our presenter, to the audience. Have a nice evening, everyone, and well, see you here in 2 more weeks.
Massimiliano, once again, many thanks for presenting at this seminar.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.